Hello and welcome. I'm Amelia Hoy, and we continue to discuss anti-racist practices within the Scandinavian fashion industry. Thank you so much for joining us. With me today from Sweden, I have Robin Douglas Westling from the Swedish Fashion Council. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for welcoming me to this talk.
Of course, of course. Now, Robin, you've been working on a pilot study. Please tell us a little bit about that project.
Yes. So I started at the Swedish Fashion Council in June 2020. And in June 2020, the world was in a urgent situation in terms of racism, and the debate and anti-racist demonstrations that the Black Lives Matter movement gave rise to. And it was a response to these tragic events related to police brutality and structural racism. So following by this, a big debate started to be discussed worldwide. And everyone was talking about this, and especially on social media. And we at the Swedish Fashion Council saw many different testifies about personalities active in the Swedish fashion industry who has been affected by structural racism and discrimination. And we thought that this is a really urgent situation and we needed to do something about it. So in early June 2020, to interviewing people that is active in our industry to get a view of the current situation that we have and to gather this in a document. And the first phase, everything was about to just have a perspective of the current situation. But after a while, we got so much information that we thought we need to collect this and do something more about this. So it resulted in 84 interviews with people from the industry who is working on all different perspectives, who is or positions, who is creating, producing, and communicating the fashion image of today. And we are very happy to be launching this soon, because there has been no material of these questions before. So after this, we can really start to work with our hands. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Robin. And first of all, thank you so much for doing the work to begin to map out some of the structural problems that exist within the industry. And because one of the things I know you and I have talked about a lot is because of Scandinavia being in some ways similar as a region. Of course, there are national differences between Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Denmark, and the Nordic countries. There are also a lot of similarities when we start to discuss some of the ways that structural racism manifests itself within these cultures. And I am really curious to see if some of the findings in your pilot study are also applicable to other Scandinavian countries, and sort of what your thought has been. But first of all, what are some of the things that you found in this in these interviews and in your pilot study?
Yes. When we got it all of the interviews, the 84 interviews, we directly saw this connection, and it was 5 different topics or themes that we really wanted to dive deeper into. And I can just say them quickly now, and then we can discuss them more deeply. And we found that the first one was that there is a lack of ethnic diversity within the Swedish fashion industry. There is an elitistic attitude who the fashion industry has been built on. We obviously have the socioeconomic and the class perspectives, a lack of knowledge regarding questions about discrimination and racism, white privilege, but also lack of knowledge of different types of people's hair types or skin tones. that is very problematic. If I can say something about that.
Yeah.
And the last one is that it is existing racism within the Swedish fashion industry.
Right. Now, I'd love to start with the last point because,
Mhm.
I had a wonderful talk with Irvin, and we spoke about, in Finland, one of the things that he's seen, the transition of, in the beginning, a lot of the interviews that they were taking with journalists in Finland had a lot to do with, well, does racism even exist? And what
Yeah,
about reverse racism? And now he feels, some years later, that the discussion has evolved to some degree. But from what I'm hearing you say, the fashion industry, at least in Sweden, is still those steps behind as far as discussing structural racism in a way where we're kind of past whether it does or doesn't exist. Is that
yeah,
correct?
and yes, that is correct. And that was quite shocking for me when we did all of the interviews, because I thought that people would understand that discrimination and racism obviously exist within our industry, because it has happened so much different things. But many people from the interviews was questioning, when we told them about some testimonies from the study. They asked us, like, do this even exist? We don't really believe in it. And that started, it was quite weird to see that people today doesn't have the possibility to think in another one's perspectives.
Yeah.
And yes, I thought that we were um, quite a bit ahead, but we have a long way to work on. And I think that each individual oneself need to take one's responsibility to educate yourself, and also feel real sympathy or empathy for other people's experiences in life.
Absolutely. I think, on a slightly personal note, I think one of the most destructive and also aggravating aspects of these conversations of late in Scandinavia has been this question of whether or not it's actually happening. Because when we start to go down that path, we stop thinking about solutions, we stop being creative in how we can create a better future. And a key point that you also mentioned, it shuts down any creative ability, any imagination of what it's like to be someone else. And to me,
Yes.
that's what any creative industry should aspire to, is to be innovative, to think forward, and to imagine futures. So,
Hmm.
I think it's really fascinating what was found in this pilot study. And you also mentioned about the lack of knowledge of hair types and skin tones. I know that was something that you found a lot in your interviews. Could you tell us more about that?
Yes. There was some models that testified about that they needed to, go to their own barber or their own hairdresser before set, or that they, got their hair destroyed on set before a shoot, and that's just weird to, be a hairstylist or a makeup artist and not have the knowledge of everyone's type of hair or skin tones when you are working in 2020. Now it's 2021, but in this contemporary time, where we are living in a cultural society, our perspective of the situation was that people would have this knowledge, but we have testimonies where people is telling us about that this model was paying a year like 20,000 kronor, Swedish kronor, to get his own hair done. So yeah,
You know,
there.
with Yeah,
Sorry.
no, go ahead. No, I mean, because this is a story that I think a lot of people of color, black women, black men, non-binary models and folks who can relate to these types of problems. You know, for you, getting all of this data and getting all these stories must have been extremely disheartening, but also, did it give you any perspective of how we could start to implement some change? Did you already begin to think, okay, I can see where this problem starts, and I think if we did this and this, we could have some different results?
Yes. Do you mean in type of knowledge, or do you mean in type of like the industry itself?
Both, really, because it
Yeah.
sounds like both are necessary.
Yes, and I think, you know, during the time we were working on this, we found out a lot of solutions. And the first one is that you, as an agent or an agency representing hairstylists, should demanding, or a client who is booking these creatives, should demanding that everyone who will be booked will have this knowledge. And also, if we're going to continue on the solution part, we can go back to the themes. And there is like, I have two different types of solutions that is quite easy for everyone to do. And the first one is to, because the fashion industry is such an homogeneous group of people, there is, and there is testimonies in the study as well, that there is the same people who is doing exactly the same work and always get booked. And I think here we need to collaborate more with each other, and also, you know, open your own perspectives and open up your world. Because if you don't only look at one way, you will only see the same people. And if you look at the sides, you will suddenly see so much more talent. And here, you as an individual working in the fashion industry, you know, how you can help another person to build that person's career is to open up your research book and, you know, book these talents so they get work. Because this is the structure. If you work more and get notified with a more famous photographer or more famous stylist, for example, you will get more work. And that's a very easy way to, you know, give space to new talent and give space and, you know, dare to do that instead. And we also have the other perspective of a solution, who is the internships perspective. We see here that class and socioeconomic perspectives is related to why it looks like it does today. If you know, the basic standard to start in the fashion industry is by assisting or doing interning, and here you often have like 6 months of free work to get the social network, the connections, and also establish a name for yourself. But if you're going to do that for free, it excludes a group of people. And unfortunately, especially in Sweden, ethnic identity is connected with socioeconomic perspectives. So, and that only makes the fashion industry available for those with a stronger economic background. And here we think that everyone who is responsible for interns, for example, should rethink a bit about how they recruit and, you know, maybe pay for work that has been done.
Yeah. I think one thing that I think is really fascinating about a lot of the conversations we've had, and also this conversation, is the fact that a lot of people think that the fashion industry is very diverse, because when you look at a campaign, you're oftentimes seeing models that look different, that have different sizes, more so perhaps than you used to in Scandinavian countries. But one thing that I know we've both talked about a lot is there's the front stage and there's the backstage. And there's also a concept that you've talked about a lot, this false representation, false diversity. Let's talk a little bit about that, so that way people who are watching can understand that it's not enough to just put someone on your brand.
Yeah, yeah. And, this, 2020 was the year when this question was really being taken on seriously, because we had so much debates about representation in front of the camera, on magazine covers, etc., etc. And we really are happy that this discussion and this debate has developed even more now to, if you are going to support this, or feel that you are going to stand behind the Black Lives Matter movement and also pushing for diversity, you need to look at your internal structure, and see how diverse is our staff, how many people of color is working behind the camera, and in that, with that said, with more knowledge on set, with more experience about different types of people, discrimination and racism wouldn't appear, because there is knowledge on set. And I think it's so many tragic accidents and situations happening in campaigns and etc. We all know what has been happening in the history. It's quite easy to recruit more diverse and with a more broader representation to stop this or end these tragic situations, because there is no good for anyone when this happens. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And kind of going back to this topic of representation, which I'm obviously really pushing for on the levels that I can, I would love to get your input and view on why representation in the fashion industry is so absolutely crucial. I know I agree completely with that statement, but I'd love to kind of hear also with the background of the pilot study, if you in your findings also were able to realize, okay, this is really why it's so important to have representation in the fashion industry.
In the pilot study, we're discussing this, and here is also so much different perspective. And one of the first ones is that oh, I'm so sorry, I lost it completely.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You can pick it up wherever you've got it. Yeah, so in the pilot study, you were interviewing a lot of different creatives. And, because one of the things I want to say also, which I think falls into this exact discussion, is that it is a lot of work, it is complicated work, and it is work that needs to continue over time. So when we start talking about why is representation important, how can we make structural change, this is a 30-minute conversation. Do you know what I mean? Like, I want people to know that this is just a little slight window into all of the change that needs to happen in the future. So with all that in mind, in your pilot study, which again is just a small study in a huge industry, but it's already showing tendencies of all the problems that exist. So within that context, what are you seeing as being the reason why representation is so important?
First of all, I think we need to talk about role models. If you can't, there is an Instagram account and an initiative from London, and a Rubric initiative, and there's a really good quote there. You can't be what you can't see. And there is one of the interviewing objects that is saying that if I didn't see anyone who looked like me, I would never enter this industry. And if I didn't see or met this person who was working with this, I will never, dare to take my next step in my career. And there was only because of, that this person saw people looking at this person. And I think this is one of the key things to, if you want to do something, you need to, feel related, and feel like I belong in this world, for example. And that's why I think, like, in the first hand, that representation is so important. And here is also so important to find these people and give them spaces, because if you don't do that, no one will see it.
No.
So, yeah.
How can we begin to make these causes? I'm also asking myself this question. How can we begin to make these causes and make this change as important for people who aren't directly affected by it, who aren't directly, because let me rephrase, because I think everyone is affected by this, but people who aren't directly excluded because of these structures. How can we begin to get them to feel this is as important as it is for Black, Brown, Indigenous, people of color, who are already on a daily level trying constantly to occupy spaces that weren't intended for them? You know, when you mentioned, for example, well, the people in charge of bringing in the interns, how can we make it important for them that they recruit a diverse staff? You know, that to me, I obviously believe in the power of conversation. I believe that through dialogues, people go, oh, you know, Amelia and Robin said this. Maybe there's some substance here, hopefully. But beyond that, you know, it's something I think about daily. It's something we've talked about a lot. How can we make this an important issue for the people who are already in power positions?
I think we need to directly go into the economic part, because I think it's then when people is starting to listen. And during this work and during this time when we were working on this study, we have been looking at so many different reports that is saying that if you get in with more perspectives in your internal structure in your organization, you will immediately come up with more innovative ideas, and that will immediately affect your economic growth. So as much more perspectives you have inside of your own company, you will get more innovative solutions as well. And I think we need to also discuss that this is about survival for many people. Generation Z, who is soon like the biggest generation on the market, demanding like concrete actions. And if you not are going to do that within your organization, I don't think you will be relevant anymore for the future. So this is a question of survival, and yeah. So,
yeah, and another, just to kind of end, you know, in a positive note of structural change.
Sorry, it was frozen for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Am I back?
Now you're back.
Good. So just to end on a positive note, as far as some of the structural changes that are happening and that can happen, have you noticed some things that are already beginning to change? Are you seeing, maybe also through the pilot study, were there any experiences among the people that you interviewed where you could see some improvements had been made?
Yes and no. You know, I'm not so concretely in the study, but you know, when you are in the town and talking with people, you hear that some companies is really doing for the better and is really working on their internal structures to actually recruit different. And from a Swedish perspective, I know that there is a lot of different initiatives that is working right now to be built up to actually do a change. And there is a lot of different organizations and companies and businesses who is working on this, consulting different companies with these questions. And I know that many companies within the Swedish fashion industry has been approaching them to, get help to actually do better in the future as well. But as much as I know right now, nothing has been announced from like a new initiative, for example. But hopefully, with pilot study, we can gather all of the industry people to discuss this and to see how we can do long-term change.
Robin, that sounds like music in my ears, long-term change. Thank
Yes.
you so much for your work on the pilot study. We look forward to reading it, and hopefully in the future there will be a report as well. We hope that, at least. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your work, and we hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you so much, Amelia, and
Thank you,
also for
Robin.
your great work.
Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch for sure.
Yes, 100%.
Good. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.